It was a very calm Saturday night in our small house. The stars twinkled brightly in the sky, and the air was cool and gentle. Mary, a kind and hardworking mother, was finally lying down to rest after a long day. Mary's life was not easy. She had been raising her 10-year-old son, Patrick, all by herself. Ever since her husband left, Mary had done everything she could to make sure Patrick was happy. She worked hard, cooked his favorite meals, helped him with schoolwork, and read him bedtime stories when he felt lonely. That evening, Mary had tucked Patrick into his bed after dinner. "Good night, sweetheart," she said, kissing his forehead. Patrick smiled sleepily. "Good night, Mom. I love you. I love you too," Mary replied, turning off the lights and walking back to her room. She snuggled under her warm blanket, happy that the day was finally over. Just a few hours of rest, she thought. Mary was just drifting into a peaceful sleep when she heard a soft knock on her door. At first, she thought it was part of her dream, but then she heard it again. "Knock, knock, Mom," a small voice called out. It was Patrick. Mary opened her eyes and sat up. "Patrick, is something wrong?" she asked, her voice gentle. The door cracked open, and Patrick peeked inside. His face looked worried, and he was holding his favorite teddy bear tightly. "I can't sleep," he said quietly. Mary smiled and patted the bed beside her. "Come here, sweetie. You can sleep with me tonight." Patrick hesitated for a moment, then climbed into the bed. He lay down next to his mom, and Mary pulled the blanket over both of them. As Patrick lay beside his mother, he kept staring at the ceiling. Mary noticed that something was bothering him. She gently brushed his hair with her fingers. "Do you want to tell me what's wrong?" she asked softly. Patrick shook his head at first, but then he whispered, "Mom, do you miss Dad?" Mary's heart ached at the question. She took a deep breath and hugged Patrick tightly. "Sometimes I do," she admitted. "But things didn't work out between us. That doesn't mean I don't love you with all my heart." Patrick's eyes filled with tears. "Did he leave because of me?" he asked, his voice trembling. Mary's chest tightened. She held Patrick even closer. "No, darling. It was never your fault. Your dad made his own choices. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." Patrick sniffled and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Of course, I'm sure," Mary said, kissing his forehead. "You make me so proud every single day." Patrick sighed deeply. "I remember when Dad used to play football with me," he said. "It was fun." Mary nodded. "Yes, he loved playing with you," she said. "And you were so good at it. Do you remember the time you scored that big goal, and we all cheered?" Patrick smiled a little. "Yes. Dad carried me on his shoulders and said I was the best player ever." Mary smiled too. "You still are," she said. "Even if Dad isn't here, I'll always cheer for you." Patrick's smile grew wider. "Thanks, Mom," he said. Patrick moved closer to his mom and hugged her tightly. "I'm so glad I have you, Mom," he said. "You always make me feel better." Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "And I'm so glad I have you, Patrick," she said. "You're my little star, and I'll always be here for you." Patrick yawned and rested his head on his mom's shoulder. "Can we make pancakes tomorrow morning?" he asked sleepily. Mary chuckled. "Of course. We'll have a big pancake breakfast." "Yeah," Patrick mumbled, his eyes closing. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the house with warmth. Patrick woke up to the smell of pancakes cooking in the kitchen. He ran to the kitchen, where Mary was flipping pancakes in the pan. "Good morning, Mom," he said, hugging her from behind. "Good morning, my little chef," Mary replied with a smile. "Do you want to help me?" Patrick nodded excitedly and grabbed a whisk. Together, they made a big stack of pancakes. Patrick added chocolate syrup and sprinkles, making them look extra special. As they ate breakfast, Patrick looked at his mom and said, "Mom, I promise I'll always be there for you, just like you're always there for me." Mary smiled, her heart full of love. "And I promise I'll always love you, no matter what," she said. Patrick grinned. "Can we go to the park later?" he asked. "Of course," Mary said. "Let's make it a fun day." At the park, Patrick played on the swings and the slides. Mary watched him with pride, thinking about how much he had grown. "Look at me, Mom." Patrick called out, climbing to the top of the jungle gym. You're amazing, Mary cheered, clapping her hands. Patrick laughed and waved. I'm the king of the world, he shouted. Mary laughed too, feeling happy and grateful for her son. That night, after a long day of fun, Mary tucked Patrick into bed. Good night, my little star, she said. Good night, Mom. I love you, Patrick replied, hugging his teddy bear. Mary kissed his cheek. I love you too. Sweet dreams. As Patrick drifted off to sleep, Mary sat by his bed for a while, watching him. She felt a deep sense of peace and love, knowing that they would always have each other.